Welcome, Elisha. How are you? It's so good to have you. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me. Yeah,
Absolutely. I'm so pleased to have with me tonight Elisha Baker from Columbia University. He is a budding junior, about to go into his third year, and last year was probably a year you could not have anticipated.
that is definitely true. I came to Columbia. I was looking for it a little. I'm studying Middle East history, and this is something that I'm passionate about, and I care about the Jewish people and about Israel. But I definitely could not have anticipated anything like what we ended up facing in terms of university, peers, professors, media. It was one of the craziest experiences of my life. That's for sure.
When October 7th happened, were you somebody who was already very involved in Jewish life on campus, or was this a wake-up moment for you?
Honestly, I was already very involved. I'm part of the modern Orthodox community. I go to davening every Friday night. Most Shabbat mornings I make it, sometimes just for Kiddush, but I consider myself very much part of the Columbia Jewish tight knit Jewish community, which is really an amazing community. And on October 7th, when we all kind of woke up to the news, we were in Hillel at davening because it was Chag, and we figured out kind of what was happening. Somebody turned on the projectors and the news, and we ended up actually watching the news as a community for hours, and that was a mixture of total shock and just the worst grief. And for me personally, also some guilt that I wasn't that I'm not in the army, that I didn't stay after my year in Israel, and my friends were being called back, one by one, sending text, "Hey, I just got called back." So that was an intense day, and the truth is that on October 7th, if I was going to be in America, I couldn't have been in a better place because my community was so supportive, and we were really just coming together in that moment.
That's actually surprising to hear, knowing what happens after the fact, right? Like knowing how you become forced to face this onslaught. So, which probably it helped you that there was this cohesion in the community, and I'm assuming also that welcomed people who, prior to October 7th, maybe had never thought of being a part of this community, but also were embraced in this kind of hug of coming together, let's say, of this identity awakening. So you mentioned the guilt was something that you felt not being able to pick up and fight. Was that talked about amongst your peers as well that day, or was that something that you feel is unique to you?
I think a lot of people have a lot of feelings, and definitely I spoke about it with some of my friends. Everyone has a different relationship with Israel and Israelis. I went to a program at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem that was half Israelis and half Americans. So, unlike many of the American yeshivas that are in Israel, half of my gap year friends are actually currently serving in the army. And, I have friends in Renana, where I actually am now. And the truth is, just, I was really just trying to get in touch with the people that I love in Israel, to,
You're lucky
to,
to have those
send support.
relationships.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, those relationships are the most important thing.
It's interesting because I think some people today, the post October 7th Jewish identity has been also a revival of some of those relationships people had. And we question, what a sad reality that we need a catastrophe to bring us together. But it is just part of human nature. And I think students in particular, who for the first years being out of the home, so you've got this like broken, a disjointed home life only because you're not in your home space. So you've got a new community that you've been a part of. Now you've got this community across the world that has been devastated. And for many people, they don't know anybody in the army, and yet they felt it maybe as deeply as you did with all of these personal connections. Your personal connections, did that help you become more engaged in activism right away on campus? Was it that coming and wanting to help others from that personal space of your heart and your connection. You became basically a soldier on campus, if I'm not mistaken.
I would say I say lahavdil to that because it's not the same. But um, I mean, yeah. First and foremost, like I say this all the time. When I say or do anything relating to Israel in America, I really want to make my Israeli friends proud because they're making us proud, every day, and not just making us proud, but I mean, they are standing up and defending and when I say our, I mean our collective Jewish homeland, the homeland of the Jewish people, in a way that is unmatched anywhere. And so when I think about, who am I in America as an American Jew, and what is my role right now, it's make my Israeli friends proud and play the part that I feel like I can play in the context that I'm in, which happens to be at Columbia, because that's my path, and that's where I am now, and so I'm going to be in that fight as much as I possibly can.
Of course, it's very difficult to compare. You're not in the front lines of a physical battle, but the battle that's taking place on campuses and around America, we've watched grow for well over a decade, I would say even two. Back in my days on campus, I was also very, very active 25 years ago, 30 years ago. We had a fight that needed to be fought, but it had a different face. And nowadays, it's becoming almost divisive, this fight, meaning it used to be that when the fight was against just rhetoric of Holocaust denial, and yes, some of this very wokeist, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, it was the beginnings of it. Again, we're talking 2 decades ago. It's been building. Do you feel that what you're facing now, that you've gotten any tools or resources on fighting the current battles that you have to fight from learning from the past?
That's an interesting question. I mean, definitely, when I think about tools for how to fight the battle, I this is just reflective of my own personal thinking and personal experiences, but I think a lot about education first. So, what are the tools that I have that kind of have driven me and given me the ability to kind of stay in this fight and feel confident in any conversation with anyone, whether it be on campus, on a screen, sometimes on social media. I try not to get baited. Um,
It's
it's
hard.
it starts with education. It really does, and I feel that I've had, in terms of learning from the past, I've had the best Jewish education that money can buy, K through 12 and the Hartman Institute, and K through 12 in the Boston area, and then the Hartman Institute, and part of what it means to study Jewish history, and the Jewish people with a capital P, is to study, the really hard times, how people thought about it and dealt with it in those times, and how we push through. And I think one of the biggest inspirations throughout Jewish history, this is obvious, is that we continue to be knocked down. I mean, nobody stops knocking us down, but the point is that we, as the Jewish people, always try as hard as we can to take agency and create a better future for ourselves. And we know that the allies are often few and far. There's very, especially today, we thought we might have built allies over the past decade, say, in social justice spaces. But in many cases, not in all cases, but in many, many cases, we found ourselves alone. And so it becomes time again for us as Jews to take agency and to say, I am here, I'm strong, I'm educated as can be. I feel that I can engage with anyone, and I feel that my story as a Jew is a compelling one, and I feel that my people's history and my country's history is a valid one. And I'll tell that story confidently, with no mask on my face and no anonymous initials covering my name.
I think it's a bravery that most people don't have because they don't feel that they can grasp all of the facts required. But the problem is we live in a time when facts basically don't matter. And it's actually needing to touch people's heart in order to get those facts through. There's only so much regurgitating of all of the historical facts that exist in the face of somebody who really isn't interested in hearing it at all. And that would be true, by the way, for even the, shall we call them, unaffiliated, unassociated young Jews who feel like they don't know what to believe. At Columbia, do you feel that on your campus there have been more, even a reawakening of that self-determination of the individual Jew? It's almost a redefinition of Zionism, a revival of Zionism for this young generation that for the last decade was convinced that Zionism was a bad word. It was a terrible thing to be. Only when we realize that Zionism is actually, and Jewish self-determination is one of the greatest civilizations in history, then we can get that sense of pride that clearly you have through education. So I think my question for you would be, how would you bridge the gap of for somebody who doesn't have that best education background? Maybe they come from even a family who is so blinded by their either distaste for Israel, their disbelief and even in the facts because of that negative bias. What do you tell people who don't have the education?
Yeah, that is like one of the hardest questions facing the American Jewish community at large. So I'll do my best, but I'm sure many different people will have different answers to that. Um, I think for starters, I mean, there is no substitute for education. So the first thing that I would do, and that I try to do at Columbia, is actually create opportunities to learn more. And by learn more, I don't mean read one pagers with answers on and talking points. I mean learn a little bit more. And the other side is part of what it means to learn is to experience and and of course birthright is important for that reason, and trips to Israel in any way are important for that reason, right? Just to build some sort of personal connection. But I think it has to go hand in hand with building Jewish connection. And so what I would say to someone that maybe doesn't have the right now it's the middle of a war. Not everyone's parents say are sending them on a plane to Israel right now. I don't even know if my plane is going to take off when I'm supposed to fly home in a few days. I really have no idea. Luckily, I feel at home here, and it'll be okay. We'll see, it will be what it will be. But what I would say to somebody who maybe can't get to Israel right now, um, and it's the middle of the semester, doesn't necessarily have the time to read a full history book, right? There are a lot of really good books out there that I would recommend. Danny Gordis has an awesome book on the history of Israel. Yossi Klein Halevi's book, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, is a really good insight into like the Jewish connection and narrative. But before all of that, just live Judaism and engage and embrace Jewish opportunities, whether that be going to Shabbat dinner or maybe trying out going to Kabbalat Shabbat beforehand and seeing if you like the songs, whether go to the Orthodox Minyan or go to this conservative or the Reform Minyan, I don't really care. Lean into the Jewish community on campus, because I think that for me, what's really driven me, besides just connection to people in Israel, is connection to the Jewish people at large and connection to my Judaism. And there's no way. I find that there's no way to build that without making an effort to live it. So again, I like embrace Judaism, and it almost becomes natural to understand why this is such an important part of our lives. And once someone understands why, like Judaism and Jewish particularism, like it's a privilege to be a Jew. I feel so grateful to be a Jew, and and it's amazing when people convert to Judaism, and there's also a reason that conversion doesn't happen at the snap of a finger, right? It takes a process to become part of the Jewish people, because it means something, and it is a distinct group. So in this world that accepts some distinct groups and rejects others, I think it's really important for us as Jews to really embrace and lean into our Jewish distinctiveness, our Jewish particularism, and
Mhm.
more simply, our Jewish lives.
Very
That's
much so. That is beautifully said. I think that for years we have been encouraged. And by the way, this is not the only generation where we faced this, okay? But have been encouraged that assimilation is the answer. Become like everybody else, you'll be accepted, they won't hate you. And now what we see is it does not matter how you practice, it doesn't matter. You are going to be labeled a Jew, you are going to be targeted as a Jew, you are going to be attacked, maligned, and there's a terrible tendency of some American Jews in particular who are saying, we are not to blame for Israel's crimes. Wait a second. That statement emerges out of a naivete about Israel and the morality for which we stand from so proud and grateful for being amongst this genius nation that we are. And yes, part of our destiny, of course, is to suffer. I'd actually encourage, building on your idea of lean into the communities that exist on your campuses, I'd actually like to suggest the alternative, which was a practice that I had back on my many years on campuses, different ones over my times, which is to open your doors in your own homes. To places where you can gather, create safe spaces, create a salon for virtual citizens of Israel. This is something that we try to encourage, where people can come together, and it isn't only in the confines of the organizational spaces on campus. Some people are afraid to go to the targeted buildings, but gathering in private can be a nice way, because they don't even know the words of Shema. And
yeah, but
they've never received just a personal invitation of somebody who says, hey, maybe you'd like to come to my Shabbat table. I think it's something that religious communities take for granted, the opening of your Shabbat table, or even getting together on Rosh Chodesh for girls, or whatever it might be, but finding an excuse to say to the other person who you can tell is uncomfortable witnessing this anti-Semitic display and say, hey, you know what? Would you like to get a cup of coffee? I think it's not only leaning in, but it's also reaching out. We say in Hebrew, lahoshit et hayad, to extend your hand. And I think that those are some crucial things for confident, courageous individuals like yourself who are already leaders. You already have your social group. You know how many Jews don't? I counsel a lot of college students who say to me, I am completely isolated. I'm not interested in going to services. I have no one to turn to. And a lot of times it's these kinds of one-on-one personal, the same reason you have personal friends in Israel, you want to make those connections on campus. So I really want to encourage, anybody who's learning from us tonight, that we're able to say, extend your hand also outward. Find the people, because Jews right now are looking for how they can connect. And for some people, it's through Shabbat. And for some people, it's going to be they were swayed by the idea of social justice. And you've been betrayed by all the social justice movements in America. But you know what? Jewish rights is a social justice movement. And there are
yeah,
ways that we can empower people to really build on that idea, even if they've never done it before October 7th.
yeah. The only thing I'd push back on is and maybe I'm being nitpicky, but I while of course I completely agree with on the point of reaching out, and I love the home Shabbat meal. It's one of the nicest parts of
What
Shabbat.
I always called it the
Um,
Shabbat shebang, Heidemann's Shabbat shebang. There are going to be listeners out there who used to come to my Shabbat shebangs at Boston University and the University of Maryland. And when I was living out in Aspen, I did it for 30 years. I'm still doing them in Israel. So someday you'll have to join me for a Shabbat shebang.
I would love to. I would love to.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd push you on is the point about safe spaces, because I worry that I worry that we might over rely on that, and that might be part of the
In
reason
what
why
way?
there are. I think that part of the reason that maybe there are fewer loud, outspoken people kind of going against the social grain, and the social grain right now is the Free Palestine movement, is that we've grown up in this culture of safetyism, of over reliance on being in comfortable situations. And I think if there's anything we can learn from this moment, if from my experience at least, but from this moment across the country and across the world, is that it's an uncomfortable place. And I think the greatest lesson from the state of Israel is stand our ground, right, in really unfriendly and uncomfortable neighborhoods. I mean, you can't find a more, I mean, who knows what's going to happen tonight,
Yeah.
but we are in an unfriendly neighborhood. Luckily, we're building some friendships, and I love that. And that's something I feel so passionate about. I want to, spend my life working on. But it's also still relatively unfriendly. And the state of Israel has just said, no, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to pack up and, create an enclave somewhere else. This is our place. And, again, lahavdil, but at a place that's not friendly for people who are, Jewish and proud of Israel. Yes, we have to find our people, and I do that all the time, and I love my friends. And yes, we have to reach out and bring people in, but I'm not sure that necessarily we should only rely on those spaces. And those spaces, I think, should be incubators for actually engagement with the unsafe, if you will, with the not emotionally safe parts of campus. And that's why I think, by the way, that I don't care what services someone goes to. I don't even want to push services, Kabbalat Shabbat or whatever it is, on anyone. But I think that like distinctly Jewish action, whether it be practice or just engaging in some sort of ritual, right? Like, saying the blessing over bread, just building up a little bit of kind of of like Jewish practice, and even if it's uncomfortable Jewish practice, can make us love ourselves more, be prouder of ourselves, so that when we're not in those safe spaces, we're more able to advocate for ourselves and stand up for ourselves. I worry about I worry about the jump to just isolate ourselves. Whether that's not what I'm not I'm not saying that that's exactly what you're
No,
suggesting. But I just want to make that
I
note.
think that I think that it's interesting though, Alicia, if maybe the idea of the safe space is kind of crucial for the person who had no involvement before October 7th. And possibly, and you can tell me what you think about this idea. It's because, as I just met with one young woman last night on a meeting, she lost all of her friends. She has no one. And so she was completely, swayed in the progressive movements, all over the social justice committees in our campus, everything. She lost all of her friends. She's completely isolated. And so I think there's actually a fear of showing up. So again, I was working at Hillel for a bunch of years in my different campus days, and it is an intimidating thing to show up where there's people like you. You know what you're talking about. You're confident. You're proud. You got this beautiful Jewish identity. You're well educated. You're clearly well spoken. You are a little scary to somebody who only had a Jewish identity awakening moment 10 months ago. So
Yeah,
I think that
that's
maybe we want to think how to maybe create, and I know I've learned that the term safe space is so charged for Americans. So I think I need to apologize for
No,
using it.
it's okay. I don't get triggered. I promise. I don't get triggered.
It's
I just want
triggered.
to
We are
avoid
living in an
encouraging.
existential war. We're all getting triggered right now.
Yeah, I just want to avoid the safe space, I guess, capital S's.
You're
Um,
right. You're right to do that. You're right to do that. It's interesting because I do a lot of work with also families and moms trying to how do we cope with help our children cope through these traumatic times. And it is about creating the safe space for our children. And it was through that experience of the moms being like, yes, this is what we need to do. And then the moms who had college age students were like, no, 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 that's not a term you can use. Very interesting how terminology does influence the context that you're fighting the battle in. And again, that's also the battle on the front the battlefront of the war itself on all the 7 physical fronts. And then you have this existential front that we're dealing with as a whole people. You have a front on campus. And let me ask you, Elisha, what do you think? You're about to go back on campus. Are you preparing yourself? Do you have committees where people are already talking and you know what they're going to be doing and how you guys need to be defensive? Because I want to really push your button and as a trigger and say, what are you doing to be proactive towards the fall? We Jews were always so reactive. We're waiting to see what they're going to do. What if we were to spend the next month building on 15 campuses across the United States, proactive from day one that a campus opens? There is the pride of being Israel strong, and there's a whole display. Imagine if we approached it differently. So tell me, what are you guys on Columbia or other colleagues that you have? What are you doing to prepare? How are you feeling about going back to campus?
So we know it's going to be bad again, because the lesson that we've learned from the administration, and that everyone's learned from the administration, at least at Columbia and at many other schools I know, is that you can break rules and get away with it.
Yeah,
That's
all the
effectively
ones who've been arrested, none of them were held. None of them were
that's
held, and none of them
effectively the
had
lesson.
consequences. And they all
Exactly.
graduated. Okay.
So the one, it's not. They've been so just not transparent, um, that we actually don't really know what the deal is with the disciplinary measures, interim
Hmm.
suspension. What does that even mean? So we know that we're basically expecting, more action, more violence potentially. I hope not, but we have to just be ready for that. And as a
Are you?
community, I would say,
You?
are we?
Are you
Are we?
doing anything at your community, for example, self-defense training?
So we're looking into self defense training, and also,
Israel Strong is your answer. This is our network of self-defense trainers who are able to provide for the people who, again, we have to realize not everybody wants to show up at the classroom X to go at this time, right? Some people want it virtually. They want it in their own place. There's lots of ways to be doing empowerment training that
yeah,
can help people get prepared. So let's think about that self-defense aspect. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah.
self defense. But I mean, in terms of like how do we think about empowering people, that really is that's like, I guess, one of three main questions that we're thinking about. That's the intra Jewish community aspect of this whole thing.
Hmm.
And what that looks like is starting to build a schedule of events, like educational opportunities for people to, whether, last, I'll use last semester as an example. We had we had Nova survivors, we had soldiers, we had Yossi Klein Alevi come and speak, and we had 150 people show up to that, which was amazing. And all these events, and with so many more events that were catered towards, so what the emotional,
Are they
the
are they collaborative? Are they funded through multiple organizations? Are they put on by one? How does it
so
work in your
so
environment?
I'm the co-chair of Columbia REA, which translates to Lion, because we're the Columbia Lions. And we're basically the all encompassing broad tent student-led Israel engagement, advocacy and education that actually operates at the Columbia Barnard Hillel. Um, and that has been, that's the club had been around during COVID. It kind of stopped being so functional, and we were already in discussions to kind of restart it under a more sophisticated, you know I like to think Hartman-esque educational model before October 7th. Then October 7th happened. First semester, it was a lot of reactivity, because that's really what was presented, and we tried to, plan our own things to display our unity, to show people that we're grieving, and we did that. But by second semester, we had events, everything from rallies. We tabled with the hostage signs, to these educational events, to hearing testimony, survivor testimony. All of that is super important, and
That sounds
it's
like it
not.
takes a lot of manpower, though, Alicia. How
I
many?
mean,
How you have a very large. I mean, if 150 people are coming to an event, that's a very large number for most areas. Do you have a lot of people who are volunteering to be involved? Is it paid staff that helps to facilitate this? Because I think one of the obstacles, and the reason that I ask you, is you're from this big university, you've got a lot of attention paid to you. You also have funding, we know. There are other communities and campuses that don't have those resources. So I'm trying to bridge, what can we learn or pass along from the Columbia experience to those who don't have the Columbia back, let's say,
Yeah. Yeah.
infrastructure.
Empower. Yeah. We have a board. I mean, it's not paid for us. I mean, luckily we actually have an amazing group of Hillel staff members that help us.
That's
And
great.
I'm super grateful for that. We also have a student board. And um, one of our challenges last year was that our student board was a little bit too big and a little bit too vague on positions. So a few of us kind of at the top, I guess the leaders ended up doing a lot of like, planning everything from like being in touch about the flyer that we're going to put up on the wall to booking the room to ordering the food and like, and reaching out obviously to the speakers. Like that's work that can be delegated. So what the lesson that we learned and that we're taking forward is we have a smaller board this year, and everyone has a very clear role. And the point is like people, like this is a commitment. This is a commitment role. Like obviously we're students, but this is a job that takes commitment. And we, as in my co-chair and I, we want to empower you, the royal you, Columbia Jewish students, to put on an event that related to Israel, Zionism, Jewish identity, Jewish peoplehood that means something to you. We can't accept everything, obviously, but we want to empower. We want to empower. And so we have people on our board who are in charge of, booking the room and ordering the food, let's say, right? Something so small as that can make somebody feel so engaged, and they are engaged, and they're so important. And it becomes like a group of 7 that are all irreplaceable as opposed to a group of 3. And now we have 7 people that are all doing amazing, meaningful work
And
that
each
all of the
one
team.
has a sense of obligation and a sense of ownership over their contribution to the big picture, which
Yes. And
couldn't
it's not just
happen
about a
without
sense.
each of those team members. And that's a
It's not
beautiful.
even just about the feeling. It's also true. Like we need everyone on this team. And that feels like a model that can work for empowerment. And obviously again, like the Hillel staff have been amazing for us. And I know that not every school has that, but all I think all we really need are a few connections, right? Like it's nice to be able to reach out to really, really smart, thoughtful scholars who we know, who we have personal relationships with, to say, look, we would really love to hear from you and our community needs you. And that's really nice. But it's also really nice to have a group of highly competent and motivated Jewish students who are like, yeah, let's get this done. So that's like so intra-Jewish community, that is a lot of what we're thinking about, empowering. And then also in terms of what we actually do, what are our educational goals? We do need more people to actually learn more and build a little bit of a shared vocabulary across our community, because we are forced into these conversations where we have to just defend, defend, defend. So that is one thing we're thinking about. But one way to defend is also to display our humanity. Like we know that Israel has never been perfect. Like no country is perfect. It's not possible. Every country has problems, and every country has political complications and and different groups that have different visions. And this is taking a piece right out of the Hartman Institute's playbook. But the point is, like, we want to empower people to own their vision, as long as it's not a vision that calls for the destruction of the state, which would undermine the entire conversation anyway. So that's out of the tent. That's kind of the intra-Jewish community. In terms of our peers who are fighting us directly, we're not going to stop engaging, because it's a value. It's a Jewish value. The Talmud is like the model for how to engage machloket l'shem shamayim, right? Disagreements for the sake, arguments for the sake of heaven. it's important to hear people out and to listen to them. When people are screaming obscene, hateful things in our faces, it's a lot harder to do that. And I understand that a lot of the rhetoric and some of the historical narratives that are going around are actually, they're undermining like the academic and intellectual credibility of the conversation, as a whole. But I'm not going to start engaging. I'm not going to stop engaging, and I'm going to continue to walk up to people in masks and try to start conversations. And the leaders of their protest are probably going to continue to come over and tell that person, you're not allowed to talk to him, which happens all the time. But it doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying. And the last piece is, what's our message, both to the university and to the media? To the university, I mean, I think it's important. I think it's just important to point out over and over again, right? It hasn't worked yet, clearly, but to continue to point out that in theory, we are aligned with the core values of Columbia University. Very basic, in theory, in terms of, what is the point of a liberal arts education? What's the point of reading, especially at Columbia? We have a core curriculum. Why do we read these classic books, these classic works of philosophy, and why do we look at works of art? And we want to be better world citizens, and why? Because we want to engage with the world, and that's what we do as Jews. We are both like ultimate particularists because we embrace our distinctiveness, but we're also there's a universalist element to us. Like we care about the world, right? That is where the Tikkun Olam piece fits into a larger Jewish story. Tikkun Olam on its own, when it ignores us, is no Tikkun Olam at all. But so we share the values of multiple perspectives and dialogue and curiosity and being true to the self, right? While also allowing others to be true to themselves. Those are like core classic, like even like core classic liberal values. So I try to make it clear that on those core values, we're on the same side. What the university's been failing to do is effectively use their power to enforce those expectations. And by enforce, I don't mean censor speech, or I don't, there's some things that obviously are out of bounds, but I don't mean become a police state on the university. That's not what we're looking for. But I mean, because we agree that the power of the university is not something that we want exercise all the time in like the most extreme ways. That wouldn't be healthy for anyone. But to not exercise any power is to allow the core values of the university to become mere recommendations. If that, they've barely even been morally clear or articulate on what those expectations and values are. So I wouldn't even call them full-fledged recommendations. So I'm looking for some clarity from the university on what are the core values. And then when you have groups of people that are undermining them, call them out and hold them accountable, right? And when you have groups of
Do you
people
have
that
a?
are, do I have what?
Sorry, go ahead. I was
Oh,
going
the
to
groups
ask, do
of
you have
people
a?
that are standing up for those values, stand up for that group of people, and that's us.
I was going to ask if you have a system for that, reporting the disciplinary action steps of what you do, and all of the campus students are aware of what they can do if they need to report something and they want to be more active, involved in fighting the lies. Because yes, there's a difference between censorship and stopping the lies. And that's where
Well,
we have to
it's
draw.
censorship versus education, and sometimes like what we've learned, this is like what we've learned throughout American history
I,
is
I,
that
I have to push back on you on that, Elisha. The Nazi leaders were incredibly well educated, and so are the academic faculty of universities across not only the United States but around the world. They are incredibly well educated,
I don't
and they
mean not. I
use.
don't mean that they're not. I don't mean that they're
I
not. But
I
what
know. I want to suggest that you maybe hone that word so that educated to what? Because they also believe that they are fighting for strong values. There's a war of truth that is happening all around us. You're a part of it in an academic environment, which is telling every student to question truth, that there is no single truth. We're living still in postmodernist times. I mean, so that's why I ask, You, on one hand, don't want to have the speech or script of exactly what to say. You don't want to have the one-liners of how to respond. And yet we also have to be able to stop those lies from being accepted as truth. Where are you going to help the person who, again, doesn't have your education, right? Where are we going to help them? How are we going to help them so that they feel they could do something in this fight?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about this as like that's the moral clarity conversation. And the point is that moral clarity doesn't suggest that there is, that there's one narrow way of viewing the world, because I don't think that that's the case. Moral clarity is an agreement an open agreement on like a set of guidelines, a set of base values, right? One of those things I think now that's being failed on, is even the idea. Ironically, it's gonna take a process, but ironically, what's happening is that the group that claims to be like the most multi-truth universalist is actually the most narrow-minded, right?
Yes.
It's a group of people that mask their anti-Semitism as universal. I mean, like I know I'm using these like big words, but it's a group that claims to stand up for everyone, but actually only stands up for their conception of the oppressed, right? Which is a very Marxist, narrow, and totally subjective way to view the world. And so when it comes to, where do we even start? Um, I think we have to start by tearing down, and I think the only effective way to do it is to use their own paradigm against them, to use their own language against them, to undermine their false paradigm, and say like, time out for a second. You're out here claiming that basically we stand up we stand up for people to be whatever identity they want, right? And we stand up for all minorities and marginalized groups. And now you have a group of Jewish students that are saying, I'm proud to be a Jew, and October 7th happened, and entirety of Jewish history is filled with marginalization, and we actually are a model of what it means to build up again after being marginalized and literally being subject to a genocide. Instead, this group is saying, no, 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 not you guys, right? So the paradigm dies with the Jews. There's no more paradigm. So
Which
maybe
makes
this is,
me question some of the logic that lots of people, try to inject into this battle. You are saying, in terms of the moral clarity that we want, and we want to be able to engage outside of safe spaces. On
we
the
have
other
to be able
hand,
to. We
let's
have to be
be
able to.
in the vein of my mentor, Elie Wiesel, remembering that there is a way to be universalist in how we apply the lessons, as long as we are particularist in how we identify their source. And the source comes from being confident in our argument, our justice, our identity, our empowerment as Jews. So one of the
100%.
things I want us to encourage is to not always say, let's worry about what they think. Let's worry about what we think. Let's worry about getting as many of the Jews that we can who are on the fence, the campus kids who, again, a story I've inherited of a girl who was told, all the Jews in the classroom, get up and leave. I know you've heard several of these probably. And, and they called her out by name and said, you can either go to the back of the room or you can leave and fail the class. She chose to leave and fail the class. And as she walks out of the class, she sees that one girl she passed by with her head buried in her hands, waited outside the classroom to catch this girl's eye. Never met, they're not friends. And she says, she says, I saw that you were, hiding your face after he told us to leave. And she says, don't talk to me. I don't want anybody to know I'm a Jew. And that's an ultimate identity crisis moment that no one knows what to do. Weeks later, after the encampments started to get worse on this one campus, this second girl found the first one who did leave, and said, you know what? I'm really in need of somebody to talk to. The fact that they exchanged a glance of an eye, opened a window. And that's what we need more of. We learn from Torah that we are responsible for spreading the light, and that each soul is a spark that we can ignite. And just because this one girl waited for the other girl, later on, she saved her. She saved her by giving her someone that she could feel confident to say, hey, you know what? I need more than what I've got for myself right now. I have no Jewish identity. I have no Jewish community, and I'm not going to go to those Jewish institutions because that's not my place of belonging. So one of the things we want to use your voice for, Elisha, is that you can say to others who aren't as confident and aren't as educated and say, what's your words of inspiration for them that they can do more with, even if it's on their own, even if
Yeah.
it's not a big organized rally and programming.
Yeah.
Maybe they can be inspired by a young man like yourself who has really kol hakavod for all of your hard work. It takes a lot of bravery. It takes confidence, standing up and being particularly a Jew.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. It starts with being proud, and to your point about the lies, there are a lot of lies coming from a lot of places, and that we could have a whole other conversation about the different intellectual like backgrounds of each of these lies, whether it be Middle East studies or DEI and all these kinds of different things. But it all comes back to, how do we begin to combat it is to basically force the people around us to get rid of the sense that to be a Jew is to be bad. Because the result of all of these lies is that the Jews are cast again, like Rabbi Sachs always says, this is what anti-Semitism is. The Jews are cast in the role of the villain, whatever society's villain is in that time. And that's what's happening. And the way to combat that, it starts with us being proud, and it starts with us saying, yes, I'm a Jew. Yes, I'm proud. No, I'm not a villain. And I'm going to stand up for myself to model what it means to stand up for ourselves. And maybe that will begin to create a society where people stand up for themselves and are proud of themselves. And then the culture of diversity that people are trying to create or claim to be trying to create might actually become a healthy one, where instead of selective diversity, we have people who are proud of who they are and aren't vilified for that. So it really starts with putting on a kippah if you're comfortable, or taking out your Magen David necklace, or putting an Israeli flag sticker on your computer, or even a menorah or a dreidel if that's more comfortable. Anything. Identify yourself as Jewish. Don't be anonymous, and stand up for ourselves, because if we want, we have to love ourselves before others love us, and we have to model what it means to love ourselves. So that's the thing that I hope all Jewish students would take from this, and
That's
bring to their
beautiful.
campuses.
We have inherited the national colors of Kahol Velavan, blue and white, since the time of Sinai. And when the war started already, people were saying, how can we do something that is not going to make me a target of an attack? People who were afraid to put on that public symbol. And so already at the Shloshim of the massacre, we launched the Blue and White Unity campaign to remind people that it really doesn't matter how you practice, but we can all wear the colors of our 4,000-year-old history. And so a silent way that people would be able to say, I am proud, but others in the world may not recognize it as like a target for attack, is to wear your blue and white. And I want to encourage you, Elisha, and your campus of students at Columbia to, Israel Forever is a clearinghouse of programs and engagement opportunities for small, intimate learning, experiential learning, and ways that you could do it in something like this. Get your campus activists prepared before, so that we are not perceived as being defensive, but rather proactive, with that same pride that drives us to wear our blue and white as
Yeah.
often as we can.
If we
And
don't
I
wear
think
it,
that
we're internalizing anti-Semitism in a really unhealthy and self-destructive way. And I think that, like, again, the lesson of the Jewish people is like we rise up again. we persevere. We're strong, and we're resilient, and that's what we have to be now.
Amen, amen. Amen, amen. It's the most repeated line in the Torah is do not despair. Do not be afraid. The evil, it will be there. Always. It's a constant. It's our job to find the way to fight the fight and to be proud. And you are a beautiful example of what other young people could aspire to be. We have this incredible program you might like that's called Serenity Scholars, which is an opportunity to encourage people to realize the moral clarity we can achieve by learning about Judaism helps us achieve serenity of our souls. And scholars who are able to translate the Torah as not only its biblical meaning and its religious meaning, but its historical meaning. And we become scholars of Jewish history, identity, and also destiny, because that's where leadership like yours can lead us. And we want to hear from as many college leaders, but I also want to encourage one other step. Reach outside your campuses. Help the parents. Talk to the parents who feel completely isolated and they didn't get the education maybe, and they wish they could learn. And again, that's what we at Israel Forever do try to accomplish, and we provide counseling and services for people all over through grassroots projects. So, Elisha, you are a grassroots leader. Even if you're involved with Hillel, it sounds like you're actually involved, and that's a success, by the way, in all the different campus organizations. And that also is something that should be replicated by more and more people. Don't be aligned with one movement, one activity, one organization. Find your many different groups where you can mingle. And that mingling makes us expand our unity, expand our heart, and eventually it will expand to our collective survival. So the more we fight, the stronger we can be. And I hope, Elisha, people are continuously inspired by hearing your voice. We're really looking forward to seeing what you do with yourself as you
Thank
get
you.
back to campus. You'll keep us informed, yes?
I
You'll
will
come
keep you
back and
informed.
let us know. Let our
Yes.
global community of virtual citizens of Israel, you are one of them, a proud virtual citizen of Israel. We want to
Yes.
recognize you, and we want to help amplify your voice to inspire others.
Thank you. Yeah, amen. We're working hard, and at the end of the day, we will continue to stand up for ourselves. So that's what it means to be proud.